Or someone would ask, what is hydrogen water? What do I do with it? Do I lather myself? Do I basically consume it? Do I consider it as an option of a, whether a biohack or for another purpose? Well, that's why you're here, to find out. First of all, what are we doing? We're actually taking regular water, in the most simplistic terms, regular water, and we're infusing hydrogen gas into that water. So in most cases, because it's hydrogen gas, which is lighter, unlike deuterium, which is heavier, it should be protein. That means, or H1, hydrogen 1. It's called protium. You've got protium, you've got deuterium, which has one neutron. That causes the problem in the ATPase, in your mitochondria that generate ATP, the little nanomotors, the ATPase. So, or, well, if you're getting tritium, that'd be a really problem. I would classify you and you could identify as a nuclear reactor, a fusion one. But since you are human, and you want to find out exactly, should I be consuming hydrogen water or not? Well, what's going to happen to the hydrogen water? This isn't deuterium depleted water. That's a different thing altogether. That goes through a distillation process where it's heated up, heavy water, which is deuterium, drops to the bottom. And the fractionation, the higher it goes up, the actual pipe, the less deuterium it has. So what they extract of water at the different levels, they're actually extracting a certain level of ppm, parts per million, of deuterium that are going to be in that water. So the higher up, you're going to get much lower, like 25, maybe 15 ppm in the same quantity. So if you have 100 mils, as an example, of water, deuterium depleted water at 25, you're going to have 85, and you're going to have regular water at 155. 155 is equivalent to sugar. Okay? So water that you would drink out of a tap or will be at 155 plus or minus ppm. Okay? That's what you're getting out of the tap. So, which is equivalent to the deuterium level in sugar. Okay, so do you want to be hydrating from that source, or do you want to be hydrating from low deuterium sources like fat? I would say you want to be hydrating from fat. So that's the first point. The second point is that it depends on the method. Now, obviously, companies that are promoting the health aspect of it are going to be primarily using hydrogen gas infusing in water. That's what they'll be using. Possibly less reputable groups may be heating the water, existing water, getting water vapor, extracting some of the hydrogen, potentially getting some deuterium in there, maybe. I don't know the processes. The problem is the industry provides next to zilch information, unfortunately. So it's some of the good players provide more. That's why we know that they're using hydrogen gas, protium, which they're infusing through hydrogenation, as they call it. Well, it's a bit like the oils that actually have the hydrogenated vegetable oils, but they tend to have that sort of, it's water extracted through that process and solvents and whatever else that leaves a whole lot of these deuterium ions inside the water, the fats, the liquid fats, and that's where the very high levels of deuterium end up in those fats due to the industrial process. So it is important to know how the hydrogenation of water is happening. Is it happening where they're using actually protium, that means the gas, hydrogen gas and they're infusing it into water, into regular water, or are they doing something a bit naughtier, cheaper and nastier? That's, I don't know. Obviously, the companies that are going to provide you with more information that they're using hydrogen gas and stuff like that, you can rely that it's protein. You can say, yeah, it's protein and all that. Now, if I was basically given an option, now I know deuterium depleted water is expensive, but if you were to get water which is slightly less deuterium, or slightly has a lower deuterium depletion level, like 130 odd, stuff like that, which is more affordable within the affordable range, would I buy that or would I buy hydrogenated water? I would buy that and not hydrogen water. Why? While the hydrogen water is going to have more hydrogen ions, it's also going to have the same ppm. You're just putting actually in that volume of water more hydrogen, but the same volume of water, it just has more hydrogen, and it's still going to have slightly, may have marginally reductions in what we call deuterium ions. So it's not going to be massive. You're just hoping that your body will take it in, which is what the body does through glycolysis. It will actually, those 10 enzymatic steps are just stripping off the deuterium. So you're left with very little that ends up, and that's why we end up with much less metabolic water from glycolysis, for the simple reason that a lot of the deuterium has to be removed and you end up with less. So you end up producing less metabolic water as well. That's why you're more thirsty, taking the equivalent of fat or sugar in that regard. So I've discussed this before in live streams and all in all sorts of places on different videos, so I'm not going to cover that. So the question here is, will the body be able to manage those pools and go, okay, I'm going to excrete some of that deuterium. I'm going to use some of that for the hard tissue, bones, ligaments, this sort of stuff. And I'm going to prioritize that low deuterium type. The proteome is going to mostly end up in the cells, providing, both ions for whatever purpose in the body. It can be used for both energy. It can also be used for other purposes of hydrating the cell in different ways. It has different properties in the way it affects the viscosity of the internal cell. But that's for another future video. And that can have some benefits in sort of better cellular function, cellular healing and stuff like that. The problem is it's introducing the same amount in terms of parts per million of deuterium. And you're hoping that the body can manage this, remove it appropriately and all that. What if you had a really poor diet in the past and you've got a very high threshold of deuterium and your body's still coping to try and actually get rid of that? Is it a smart idea to use this type of water? Maybe not. See, the problem is it's a maybe not or maybe yes. Somebody could argue, because we don't have any research, but I would say the reason why I would say maybe not, even though I don't have any research to back me up, is that I do know there is a threshold that my body can actually deal with deuterium. That means there's a threshold, an enzymatic threshold. We produce our body as we age even less in ATP, weight of ATP, and all that energy has to be used for a number of different purposes. And some of those enzymes that are dealing with managing and removing from, the molecules of fat and sugar, removing some of this problematic, deuterium. Well, there is a threshold. that they can't work above. So if you've got pre-existing, you're adding additional stuff, you're asking the body to do more than it can do. So you may be actually both benefiting and hurting yourself at the same time, is what I'm trying to say. Since we don't have like definitive research in this area, we have no idea. But I would say that if you're drinking a certain quantity of this hydrogen water, you will still get, as if you were, let's say you drank tap water. Let's just ignore the fluoride, all the other issues associated with tap water. Let's say it was pristine tap water. You are living in the perfect country, which doesn't exist, run by lovely Democrats, which doesn't exist, and they were providing you with the ultimate tap water, which are very unlikely, because remember, they're trying to depopulate you. So they're not going to do that for you. You know, that's a speculation on my part. It may not be true. YouTube, be nice to me. So we have the sort of like the list of different, or maybe that way, the list of different waters, which we don't really know a lot of things about. It depends on what the industry tells us. You know, one industry player will tell you, oh, you know, it's got these and these features. Others will tell you this. Others will actually write protein, you know, infused with protein. We know that that means infused with non-deuterium water. Others will say that they're using spring water, which is low in deuterium, and then they're infusing it with protein. So technically speaking, you're actually getting much better spring water than you would get if you were buying bottled water equivalent, because most spring water tends to be lower in deuterium, especially glacial stuff will actually be much lower, in the lower 40s or mid 40s or below. So it can be anywhere between 10 or 15 ppm lower than the tap water. So it varies on the products, okay? It can even be slightly more if it's down to 136. Like there are some glacial waters that can be that low in that regard. So that would, you know, pretty much if it's 136, yeah, you're talking about 19 ppm difference. Well, that's quite a bit. You know, if you consider the enzymes, what the body has to do and all that, you know, that's even slightly below the 130, the 138 that you would get with legumes, for instance. For some reason, they're low. It's their structures. Obviously, they've got all the anti-nutrients and everything else. But if you're looking at sort of low deuterium plant foods, that's possibly the most low. If you would prepare it to reduce the anti-nutrients and all that, vegans and vegetarians would be far better off consuming that sort of stuff for their ideology food than, in terms of deuterium, than some of the other sugary crap that people like Julian Ryder, you know, consumes, like raw sugar, which is in that 150 plus ppm. So there's your sort of difference in that regard. But the key thing here, take-home message, is really that the hydrogen water will still, in terms of the quantity, so if you're consuming, you know, a litre of hydrogen water, that litre of hydrogen water, yes, will have more ions, which are protein. So you'll be introducing in the body more hydrogen ions, but on the other hand, without having to consume food, additional food, but on the other hand, for the same quantity, if I have like a glass of regular water or a litre of regular water here, and pretty much a litre of the hydrogen water over here, their ppm in terms of deuterium is going to be the same. So then there's the management side on the body. Can the body cope with that and deal with that? And so you can get both the benefits of the lower deuterium ions in that water, which are in greater amounts, and you're actually hoping that the body can sort of manage and make sure that more of those are going to end up inside you. Can I prove that? Can industry prove that? No. I haven't seen a radiocarbon like where they take these ions and they basically they've got a radioactive sort of tracer of some sort to be able to work out where are these ions going. So I don't see that to be able to then detect and say, okay, this is going to urination, this is going out of the feces, this is going into this tissue or that tissue or whatever. And you'd have to have a large enough group to basically to be able to show that similar things happen. If you've got a lot of variability, well, potentially there could be the risk of pre-existing deuterium sort of storage in your body, and all of us being exposed to a Western diet to varying degrees have some exposure. So that's an issue in itself. There's a lot of question marks on whether it's, going to be beneficial or not. So I can't tell you that. Nobody can really make that claim with certainty. If you had the DOSH, I'd rather go for focusing on deuterium depleted water or the cheaper option, glacial water. That would be far better because it's going to be down, especially if you can get it down to 130 odd ppm, which is still in the affordable range because it hasn't gone through like being processed through a distilling system, which adds cost, labour cost, manufacturing cost. So if you're focused on getting glacial water that comes from certain parts of the world, like the Himalayas and stuff like that, at much higher elevations where the ppm is going to be much lower, then you'll be able to, it'll be slightly more expensive than regular spring water, but it will still be far cheaper than, than sort of hydrogen water or especially deuterium depleted water. Now, they have their place for therapeutic purposes for people that have got cancer and a number of other diseases where it can be helpful to improve mitochondrial function. But for the average person, getting it from either glacial spring water, some hydration when needed, we over drink anyway, which is a problem in our society, and most of it getting it from fat from our food is going to be the safest approach because most animal foods are within the safe zone of below 130 ppm. So, and that's where we want to be. So even the grain-fed stuff is in the 120, between 120 and 130, and the ones that are grass-fed are below the 120. So obviously grass-fed is way more important if you've got underlying issues that you're actually still healing. But if it's an affordability issue, then still even grain-fed is going to be better than most other options out there for both hydration with the tip, and also from hydrating from fat, and also as a food source compared to many other things that exist in the marketplace. That's pretty much my take on hydrogen water. Have I ever consumed it? No. Will I ever consume it? No. Would I, if I had unlimited resources in terms of DOSH, would I consider it? No. If I had that unlimited, I was Bill Gates or, somebody like that with a lot of wealth, well, then I would actually consider deuterium depleted water, in the sort of 115 ppm, which is similar to fat. So when wasn't consuming enough fat, I didn't feel, or I was doing a bit of a water fast, I'd use that, or for my coffees or stuff like that. That's what I would use. Now I sort of use glacial water, which is lower than tap water, but it's still not as good as fat, but it's still better than regular water for my coffees. So it's a matter of working out your best options, what can work and what is appropriate. Because we don't want to be adding too much deuterium to our bodies, because the majority of us Westerners, we're not like the Maasai, we're not like the Hadza or any of these people. The majority of us have been exposed to very high deuterium sources from both water sources and food sources for a very long time, for decades. And we have far more damaged mitochondria. We need to basically reduce that threshold, as we're getting older, to give our body a bit of a chance to recover, heal, and do better, unless we want to suffer more in older age. So it's a matter of taking those things into consideration when you're trying to balance when you're trying to balance between nutrition, lifestyle, and water sources, sort of things, and finances, obviously, which falls within the lifestyle side. Trying to manage those levers of food, fluids, and your financials, it's going to be different for everyone. But if you want to get more bang for your bucks, there are other ways. Grounding is free, and that's going to give you a lot about all these the negative charge sort of discharging into the earth. Also, those negative ions. Also, getting the antioxidant effect of those extra electrons, which stabilizes tissue. All those things are going to be beneficial to you. Trying to focus on getting most of your food ions for ATP. You should be focusing on fat as much as possible in that regard. And we need to push back against the so-called nonsense of, the current sugar craze that people have got out there. That's a high deuterium source of ions for your mitochondria. That's not a smart thing. That's a foolish thing. Any fasting mimicking diet, whether it's a keto, a high-fat, low-protein keto diet, fasting, or fasting mimicking diets like the vegan diets, this is all the same shit. It's low protein. You're putting yourself in a catabolic state. Yes, you're going to lose weight. So what? Your focus should be on health. And then weight issues tend to sort themselves out in the long run. Your focus should be on actual health, and prioritizing animal foods is the best way for health. I think if you're wasting too many resources on other things, and if you get best to spend a bit of dosh and get like either shoes that are basically grounded shoes, or the strips, the grounding strips that you can actually put on shoes. Then there is the sort of barefoot type shoes that allow you to ground, and then there's the barefoot type sleeve that goes into your feet, where you can. It's like walking barefoot, but protected in that sort of sleeve. There are different products out there in the marketplace. What works for you and your lifestyle, that's up to you to decide. But these are the things that I would rather do that don't really cost that much and provide more bang for your bucks. Hydrogen water is just another one of those things where industry is trying to extract money out of the longevity community and the sort of community, you could say, that is aware, health aware. That's where they're focused on. They're tapping into that market. Good for them. It's the business people, they're tapping into that market. The question is, as a consumer yourself, are you getting your most bang for your bucks? No. Is there a downside? Yes, that deuterium ppm isn't going to be reduced. So if you're consuming large amounts, like many litres of this water, you're going to be introducing high amounts of deuterium into your system. That may not be I don't believe that is a good idea. So you've been warned. I hope this was informative to understand the issue. Anyway, see yous.